Hi everyone, and welcome to today's lesson. The second part in my series on making a still life painting from a photo. So we're going to be following on from the kind of wash drawing that we produced last week, that you can see here. So this was all done in raw umber with mineral spirits and just using a single brush. And the main point of it was just sort of block in the general positioning of all the shapes. And get a sort of a value composition we're reasonably happy with. So it was a bit of white back, a bit of just kind of washing on. A lot of this, most of this will get lost as the painting progresses, but it just gives you a nice kind of solid foundation to work from as you start to apply your colours and values in this next step. So the next step is called dead colouring, although it's going to be taken a little bit further than what dead colouring traditionally is considered to be. And basically it's adding all the local specific colours to the painting as accurately as possible in all the colour and value relationships. But it's not the most usually it's not the most vibrant stage, although the way that I'm going to be working today, I'm going to be trying to kind of keep it quite vibrant and interesting looking even as I'm just laying the colours in. It's a good approach because it allows you to you could stop a painting at any stage if you make each progression kind of interesting in its own right. So if you produce a nice wash drawing that has a nice loose feel to it, if you make your dead colouring a bit more interesting and not too bland, but you'll see why it's called dead colouring. It'll look a bit different to the final painting as we go into the third and fourth stages of the piece, as we kind of refine back into what we're going to do today. So my main kind of aim is going to be, now that I've got my shapes roughly established, start building some form into particularly the skull, obviously, and then some of these flowers as well. Figure out exactly where the blacks are going to go, where the whites will go, the kind of lightest light and darkest dark. There's definitely a lot of black down underneath the skull here, and then white in different portions of the piece, and get those relationships so you can see there's kind of light hitting, kind of pure white hitting these petals on the magnolia, and then you kind of have a step down to the magnolia petals and the lighter portions of that little shard of the face, and then slightly darker again to the lightest portions in the skull. So this stage is going to be kind of figuring out all those specific relationships, and seeing exactly kind of what value you need for the lighter parts of the skull, and to make them look light enough, how dark do you have to go with the dark parts of the skull, how do they relate to the shadows and the blacks kind of lower down in this portion. It's fairly monochromatic, this piece, it's not the brightest thing, so we're probably going to be sticking with white and titanium white and ivory black, raw umber, because that's what we started with. You'll find raw umber will be kind of discovered in various halftones. Probably some burnt umber if we want something a bit warmer. Today we'll probably be using yellow ochre and some Venetian red. Any kind of earth red will work. And we'll leave the kind of higher chroma reds and yellows for later in the piece, in case they're necessary for kind of making some lights a bit more intense. But for this, we're going to stick with a fairly limited palette, which is generally the approach I recommend you take with any painting, really. So kind of think, what's the most basic palette that I need to do this painting, and start with that, and only add new colours into your palette as you see fit. So if you can't reach a colour and you really need it, then add it onto your palette. But if you can mix a colour from what you've already got, or you can kind of balance everything in a way that you don't require a brighter colour, I recommend just keeping things simple. So put some titanium white out, and some ivory black higher up. Burnt umber, and swap them around. Put my raw umber down here. Got some Venetian red. Oh, actually, no, sorry, that's burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is a slightly lower chroma red than Venetian, but we'll stick with that. There's not really anything particularly red in this piece. Probably the most red thing is this table down the bottom, but I mean it's pretty brown. So that should definitely be sufficient. Put my paints away for now. Now, brushes I'm going to be using are these three, I think. So I've got a slightly larger kind of semi-bristly brush here, and then a kind of smaller square brush. Not sure if it's focusing at all. I'm deciding not to autofocus. And then a small kind of detail brush for any little sections I need to get into, but I won't be starting with that. And as far as medium goes, I'm just going to be sticking with straight odorless mineral spirits. There's a general principle, not sure if I've gone over it yet, when you're painting, that you want to paint fat over lean. So you don't want a lot of oil in your mediums when you first start painting a piece. You want oil in later stages. That's to do with the way, the rate at which the paint layers or paint films dry. If you have oil underneath, like a kind of oilier layer that dries slower underneath a less oily layer that dries faster, the layer underneath will kind of keep shifting a bit as it dries and cause cracking in the surface layer. So you'll see in kind of paintings in galleries when you get excessive cracking, it's usually to do with the layering being a bit off. Joshua Reynolds, who's a fairly famous English painter, was notoriously bad at layering his paintings, and they all cracked within about 50 years of being completed. So let's get cracking on this one. I'm going to start with my darkest darks, so that's going to be pretty much just going to go straight black into these sections here that I've already kind of designated, and then probably start patching in a little bit, maybe black mixed with a bit of burnt umber into this lower section. I'm only going to be painting, probably showing the process for blocking in the skull, the face, and the lower portion of the painting in this demonstration, and then I'm going to do another time lapse as I fill in the top section, just to speed things up, because I'll be kind of reiterating what I'm already saying to begin with, and you can still see the process, but it won't take you quite as long. So I'm going to start, as I say, with laying in these darks. So I'm going to use a reasonable amount of mineral spirits, and I'm going to start with this kind of medium-sized brush and take the opportunity to kind of rework some of the shapes. So you don't want to necessarily just copy exactly what you put down in the first day. You can use it as an opportunity to correct anything that seemed at all off. You'll be reinforcing these darks later on, so if they're a little bit washier than you like, don't worry too much. So I'm going to try to take your time with these brush strokes. Be as considered as possible. Ideally, if you can get your brush strokes correct right at the beginning, as with anything, you won't have to do too many adjustments later on. You'll also give a bit more intent and strength to your brushwork, which is usually nice. Obviously it depends a bit on what kind of effect you're going for. So that pretty much does it for... got this little triangle in here. It's definitely completely dark as well. There we go. So we're going to make this little section here black as well, though it kind of moves into burnt umber. So I'm going to do a little bit zooming in, figure out exactly where in all these twigs these twigs are going to be built up in quite a lot of layers because they're quite complex. Works better in a layered effect, as you'll see, rather than attempting to kind of get everything exactly right right at the beginning. You'll tend to smudge, and the twigs are quite kind of twigs are mostly quite crisp little lines, so it'll be a bit of a struggle to try to get that effect immediately. working kind of wet into wet in this way. So what I'm kind of going for with this, slightly less precision than when I was creating the boundary of the skull, but kind of just slowly building up a kind of foundation of texture. I think for now that'll probably do it for sort of pure black. I'm now going to move into using a lot more umber, which actually comes up pretty dark as well. Probably won't be super noticeable, the difference on camera, but it basically the main difference between it and using black is black tends towards, it's obviously grayer, and then tends towards blueness. So ivory black is a blue black. You do actually get warm blacks, Mars blacks or warm black, but not so commonly used. A blue black is useful because it it allows one to mix it with white, and you get kind of a fairly good cool blue, kind of greyish blue, which for most purposes is quite good. You'll probably see it used a bit in certain aspects of this painting. If you want a kind of a good warm cool shift, then it works as a good kind of counter to raw umber and burnt umber, which are both quite warm. Raw umber particularly warm. So I'm not being super precise with this. I'm trying to observe the reference, and with my kind of textured brushstrokes build something approaching how it looks. But mainly I'm just trying to get a feel for, or try to capture the feel of the original reference, to get that kind of scratchiness. And I'm going to be looking for different sorts of textures in other parts of the piece. Using a mixture of quite thick paint and quite washy paint helps to enhance that kind of feel of different textures. So I'm now going to mix a kind of dark grey for these twigs, which are not exactly the same as the very fine grass, which tends towards being a bit warmer than these. Not too fussy about sort of getting rid of all the white at the moment. It's something I'll kind of look at later. It can be quite nice to have those sort of little bits of white showing through, or if you were working with a ground colour, whatever the ground colour would be showing through the piece. Because you're working wet and wet, you can kind of pull certain parts together. Obviously paint into stuff to re-emphasize them, just sort of reinforcing where that shadow underneath where this twig is resting. You go back to a slightly lighter colour, start locking in these bits. Go back in with a slightly lighter colour, give these twigs a little bit of form. With the same colour, just go in and patch. There are some aspects of the undergrowth that are kind of equally greyish. Not everything's quite so warm, so it's nice to get a few kind of little shifts of warm and cool in there as well. But you can see that's sort of starting to emerge fairly effectively. That's a good general impression of what's going on in that portion of the painting. So I've just mixed up a lighter colour. I just want to adjust the positioning of that twig. So make something up that I think will approximate what that background wall is going to end up looking like. And block a bit more over the top because it's going to go back to being a bit darker around this portion. Yeah, it's not too bad, fairly happy with how that's emerged. And that's just generally the sort of the approach we're going to be taking across the whole thing, so it's not kind of super detailed or prescriptive what we're doing. Just kind of feeling around with colours and values, and trying to get something that matches your subject matter. So I'm going to return to this larger brush. I'm going to try to mix kind of goldeny colour for this floor plane, which by nature of the type of lighting is receiving a bit more of the light source, just because it's kind of facing upright. So it'll blend quite easily into the burnt umber, but it'll probably tend towards turning a bit green if I was trying to mix it into pure black. So what I'm going to use is a kind of mix up a burnt umber black mixture and use that as a kind of buffer. It's going to be kind of a greyish colour. It's this sort of thing you're kind of figuring out with this part of the drawing. So what I'm trying to avoid is the transition going too grey, because when transitioning out of pure black, any lighter colour will tend towards greyness compared with the kind of scumbly glazed kind of ochre look that we've got it transitioning into. And don't be too worried if you don't quite get something like that perfect first go round, because there's certain things that if you're doing kind of blendings, they won't work quite as well as when you go back and you can kind of use glazing to correct anything that's gone wrong. So I'm not going to kind of catch it perfectly right this time, and it's something that I'll talk about as the piece progresses, and we're doing more to get it all to work and hold together well. But I'm going to go for something kind of that transitions as well as it possibly can. And that's mainly kind of just blur your eyes and kind of think about how chroma is shifting, how the hue is shifting, how effectively it's working as it comes out of the black. Some people don't actually use black at all, but I think it's a very useful colour. For one thing, it gets you kind of the darkest possible values, and it makes for a nice look in a lot of situations, but it does require a bit of glazing, so it's not an issue really for this piece, because we're going to be going back and reworking a lot of the parts of it. But if you were just kind of going for a reasonably perfect finish to begin with, you might struggle a bit to get the black to work perfectly right. So you notice, as I expected, a lot of the colours that we're using are kind of exchangeable for different bits. There's really not a huge range of variety in the colour going on in this piece. It's mostly just earthy browns, various shifts from kind of cool to warm or yellow to reds, that sort of thing. So I'm going through and reusing any colours that are already on my palette. But that pretty much does it for this portion of the piece. Pretty nicely established background for the skull. The only thing I might do actually before working on the skull is go in and just find out, there's this kind of grey, kind of much cooler shift of greys rather than the warms going on in the twigs and the ground plane. And I might just establish that kind of just up to roughly over the top of where the skull is. And that'll be kind of all I do, I think, in terms of describing what goes on, and then I'll do a time lapse for the top section of the piece, which is the washing in the flowers. But yeah, for now I'm just gonna give my brush a bit of a clean, or both of them actually. They've got a lot of burnt umber on them. I'm going to mix up, it's not entirely kind of cool grey, but it's certainly a shift, so I'm going to mess around a bit and get the right value. There's definitely, it's a lot closer in value to this kind of little mass of twigs, sort of nest, than it is to the front part of the skull, so we want to try to get that relationship to work right. And then we'll go back in, work on the skull, maybe return to the other bits to correct them, but they should be roughly right. So if I take a bit of white, and then up here, it's grey, that's not too bad, pretty much straight off the bat. So it's quite easy to mix decent kind of warm greys, because you will usually have some kind of warm colour on your palette, and then you just mix a bit of black and white together, and that's pretty much it. And the darkest portion of that background is what I just painted, so it actually starts to get a bit lighter as it kind of moves up here. So create a bit of a transition of that darker little corner. So again, I'm kind of using the opportunity to adjust any of the drawing that I wasn't entirely happy with. Kind of like working with negative space behind the petals. Yeah, that was fairly simple to get right. As I say, using such a limited palette, there aren't quite so many kind of potential mixtures that you can go for. So it usually doesn't take quite so long to figure out what works best. Swap back to this side, which is actually a bit warmer than the other one. Maybe not exactly the right colour, but not too bad. Kind of breaks in a bit there. Leave it at that for now. And then drop back to another paler colour. This one I might just wash over. Basically looking for something a bit warmer than that colour we initially established, and a bit lighter. Going to merge those together. So we've now got values surrounding the whole skull, which is going to make it easier for us to judge all the different values within the skull. That'll do for now. I'm not going for anything kind of too crazy accurate. With this stage, but I do recommend you try as much as possible to go for a finish that could work. Partly it's an opportunity to kind of experiment with looser brushwork than maybe you usually use. I certainly tend to tighten up my brushwork as pieces progress. So you can kind of play around with different kinds of applications, knowing that you're going to work over the top of it anyway. And anything that looks really good, you can just keep. So it works really well, I think, as a process. It can be both accurate and loose at the same time, which is nice. So yeah, the next thing I'm going to do is try to figure out, probably it's going to be one of the trickier aspects of the whole piece, but try to figure out the values required for the skull. And we know they're going to go. I mean, one thing you can do is you could look and say that what you would deem the shadows in the skull are a similar value. Basically, you want to find what are they a similar value to. And looking at it, I would say they're not far off the value, kind of this value here. So I've mixed up a slightly warmer version, which starts to capture some of these little streaks in the sky, not the sky, the background. And then I can kind of start washing in big chunks some colour for the skull. So I'm going to initially be working on the shadowy parts of the skull and then working towards the lightest portion. And as I say, I need to structure the skull so that lightest section the lightest section is going to need to be darker than pure white in order to leave enough value or range of value to get the kind of pure whites in these kind of glowing bits of the petals. So I might jump over here to something approaching the halftones, start rubbing them in as well. So as I've been saying, this whole process is an opportunity to carry on the drawing that you started in the first part. So I'm working pretty quickly, just trying to observe things as much as possible. So my main focus for this is sort of working on working on shifts from kind of warm to cool, and then values as well. And the initial lay-in is going to end up erring on the dark side. But then I'll be going back and adjusting and adding light to it. So I'll be doing that today, and then obviously as it progresses we'll be working on it a lot more as well. So you don't have to be too fussy with this stage, it's mostly just about getting a reasonably effective lay-in, giving you a platform to work from. There's a lot you can adjust. In no way are you kind of locked into anything at this stage. So now that we're starting to get a kind of averaged, sort of greyed out version of what's going on, I'm going to start adding in a bit more variety, a little bit more detail. I think that's it for all the darkest portions, possibly some of the teeth. Go reasonably dark. My skull's actually lost all its teeth, so I'm kind of making them up as I go along. This establishes a sort of roughed in sort of shadow pattern. Certainly something we'll be working over. So you know what all the shadows are, we've got kind of a general idea for their shape, what's going on inside them. I'm now going to go back and rework, not actually rework, but add in the lights, essentially. Let's give my brushes a quick clean again. We've got a fair amount of room to kind of lighten things. Because I painted quite thinly, if you kind of start piling on a bit of light colour, you can quite quickly lighten an area. So at this stage you can kind of just keep developing things as much as you like in this session. As I say, you don't have to be super painstaking. You're going to be revisiting the painting a lot from this point. What you want to do is you just want to move things forward each time you work on it, essentially. So you don't want to keep working to a point where maybe you're detracting from the overall effect of it. But if you're kind of working and it's going along well and you're adding detail nicely, then by all means keep working as long as you like. But something along these lines will be kind of sufficient level of detail to move into the next stage. There are certain kind of qualities you just won't get painting in this kind of manner. You'll have to be glazing, sort of do a bit of glazing over the top, or some more kind of thicker direct painting to achieve certain effects. And white doesn't actually tend to build up when you're adding it over the top. You need a few layers to kind of reinforce the light. Same with the darks actually, so you'll need to reinforce those blacks that we worked on earlier in the piece. But I think for this part of the demonstration, I'm going to leave it at that. I'll probably, in the time lapse, I'll kind of go back to it a bit as I'm working up here. It'll definitely be something that I'm going to push and pull a lot because, as I said earlier, the sort of working on the relationship between the light, how the skull is kind of developed in terms of form compared with the lighter sort of portions of the leaves that are catching direct sunlight will be an important aspect, and it is something that can later on in the piece we might look at and kind of just get rid of those highlights, and then it gives us kind of a full value range for the skull. But for the time being, we're going to keep that kind of a more muted look in order to leave that space to develop kind of some highlights into the flowers. Yeah, so you can keep messing around as much as you like, really, like I am here, until you get something you like. So if you notice anything seems over the top, like I feel like some of those yellows are a bit too extreme. I want to pull it back to be a bit cooler. You can quite quickly do that in this aspect, in this part of the piece. But yeah, that's it for now. I'll follow this with a time lapse showing the kind of rest of the dead colouring, and then we'll leave that to dry, and next week we'll be going back, and the next stage will probably, what I'll do is I'll just kind of go through how you add detail to one particular area, but for now it's just kind of blocking in all the colours that you want, getting a pretty decent approximation of the look that you're after in this stage. And I recommend trying to get, regardless of the size of the piece, just try to get all of this done in one day. It'll keep you kind of loose. You won't be super accurate, but it just pushes the painting forward, and it means it can be quite a quick process. But yeah, that's it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this and you'll enjoy the time lapse. I'll see you next week.